Good morning, everybody. I hope that you're keeping safe and well during this lockdown period. I know that many people are struggling with stress and anxiety at this time. And so this morning, I'm just going to share a little bit of information and some tools on the experience of anxiety, how anxiety works, and some basic strategies and tools of how we can cope with anxiety. And so anxiety is quite a multifaceted experience. When a person becomes stressed or anxious, quite a few different aspects or elements of themselves as a person is being activated. And so anxiety impacts your bodily process, your body physiology, like your blood pressure, your heart rate, body chemicals. It impacts your brain's neurology, so your neurochemistry in terms of the hormones in your brain, the chemicals in your brain, and also the different parts of your brain that get activated and get heightened in the time of stress. Anxiety impacts your thought processes. Anxiety can be triggered by certain types of thoughts that we have, and can also lead to certain types of thoughts. And of course, our emotions are very much involved when it comes to our experience of anxiety. So coping or dealing with anxiety involves understanding all of these different facets to it, and also helping ourselves with strategies on a multifaceted level. So one of the things that's important for us to understand is that we are designed as human beings for our brains and our body to protect us during times of challenge or crisis or during perceived threat. So if you are walking down the street and suddenly a dog comes towards you that's vicious and barking, and you are afraid that it's going to attack you, in that moment in time, your body and your brain are working in unison, and they're communicating with each other all the time through chemical processes, through physiological process to protect you in that moment of stress or threat. And we are protected to either fight, to deal with that threat, or to flight, that is to run away to protect ourselves, or to freeze, which is also a method of protection or defense mechanism. And those are almost involuntary responses that happen just because of this communication that's happening between our body and our brain. So in the same way, when we are faced with emotional threat or something that feels emotionally challenging to us, our brain and our body respond in exactly the same way. So there's a whole lot of processes that are triggered inside our brain and inside our body that contribute to this feeling of anxiety. So a lot of times people have physiological responses such as sweaty palms, difficulty breathing, your blood pressure increases, your heart rate increases, tightness in your chest. And so all of these are the physiological processes of what's happening when your brain and your body are sending out these messages to each other to protect you under this perceived threat. There's a whole lot of hormones that are being released in your body, and also chemicals in your brain because of all of these processes that are being aroused. The other thing that happens when a person is anxious is that you often battle to have access to logical thinking or problem solving, or to be able to make rational decisions. And that's mainly because during this time of threat, it is our low parts of our brain, the parts that are more responsible for processing senses, that are activated. And so there's a lot more energy and resources being diverted to that part of the brain rather than this frontal executive part of the brain that is responsible for more rational, logical processing. And so that is often the reason why when we're under stress, or when we're under experiences of anxiety, we can't access this more logical, clear thinking process part of our brain. The other thing that happens often is that anxiety is accompanied by thoughts of fear, thoughts of worry. Sometimes there can be catastrophizing thoughts, like worrying about worst case scenarios, over exaggerating the likelihood of things, negative things happening to us. Sometimes we end up having thoughts that begin as small little worries, and these are little snowflakes that run down a hill and end up being creating an avalanche and a huge snowball of other thoughts that get attached to it very quickly. And so the more anxious we become, often some of these worrying thoughts get triggered, and then they result in more panicky, fearful emotions. So all of this can become a vicious cycle. Our brain works in a way that when we are born into the world, it seeks to help us make sense of our experiences that we go through. And so it lays down certain processes or pathways that it can utilize in order to make sense of what is going on with us. So apart from what happens to our brain and our body in the moment of anxiety, what also can happen is that if we have in the past experienced difficult, challenging life circumstances or other stresses, and there have been these learned behaviors or learned patterns that have been acquired along the way, then these might get triggered as well, which heightens our anxiety experience. So dealing with anxiety can be quite overwhelming if we don't understand all of the various aspects of what's happening to us and how to actually cope with them. So it can be overwhelming to even listen to this explanation of how anxiety works. But if we have the correct and efficient tools of how to manage ourselves, overcoming anxiety and working through stressful and challenging experiences is very possible and can be done very successfully. And so this weekend I'm going to be running a workshop. It's going to be virtual, so you can access it remotely, and I'm going to be sharing some tools and some strategies on how we can manage ourselves when we go through experiences of stress or when we experience anxiety, how to understand these different facets of what makes it up and how do we deal with anxiety on these different levels. But just to share a few quick tips with you today and some strategies, one of the quickest ways of getting ourselves out of the cycle of where our brain is signaling our body to protect ourselves, and our body's heightened responses is feeding back to our brain that we're under threat and our brain needs to keep all of these processes mobilized. One way to break that is through our breathing, which is a very quick, accessible, on the spot tool that a person can use. It sounds very simple, but the impact of breathing is really, really significant and has shown through numerous avenues of research how powerful it can be to resetting our brain and our body state. And so just stopping in a moment of anxiety to focus on your breath and to slow your breathing down. It can help if you have a focus point. It doesn't matter if you don't, but just to concentrate on slow, simple diaphragmatic breathing, which is breathing from your tummy, so that when you inhale, you fill your tummy up like a balloon with air, and then you exhale. And you can do that slowly, and you can do that for a number of counts that feels comfortable for you. And what this does is that calms all of these physiological processes down. It also gets you out of that headspace where you're in this heightened sensory part of your brain, and gives you something else to focus on. But it also then, once your body is calmer, your brain is not getting these messages that you're under threat, and so the brain can almost tell itself that it's kind of off the hook now too. Once you're calmer, then you can access the more rational part of your brain, and you can then start dealing with what might have been some of the underlying thoughts or emotions around the anxiety, and start to deal with that. Other simple methods of calming during anxiety is to access nature. So today I'm talking to you from my garden. It's something that I love doing, being in nature, hiking and walking regularly. And of course, being on lockdown, that's been limited now. So I've been taking as much advantage of my garden as I possibly can, reading outside, having as many meals with my family outside. But if you have access to a garden, then it's really useful for you to perhaps take yourself there and focus on what is around you. Engage your senses. So don't just change environment, engage yourself in the environment. And what I mean by that is try to focus on what it is that you're hearing in your garden. Are you hearing any insects or birds? What do you smell? What are the smells in your garden like? How does it feel to be there? How does it feel to have... I'm competing with a Haida. So there you go. There's the sound, focusing on the sounds of what's around you. I was talking about the feel. How does the sun feel on your skin? How does it feel to have the slight winter chill in the air? So engaging your senses in what's around you can also help you to get out of that heightened anxiety experience. Listening to certain types of music is very calming. Just coming back to the garden, there's lots of research that shows the power and the benefit of phytochemicals for our body in terms of resetting ourselves. So yes, there are certain frequencies of music that are shown through neuroscience to help your brain to get into a calmer state, and doing a right-brained, more creative type of activities is also very calming and helps your brain to reset. Being cautious of your nutrition so that you're not introducing chemicals into your body that would activate or increase anxiety, introducing foods to the extent that you can that have folic acid, B vitamins, omegas also help you with feeding your brain with the nutrition and the chemicals that it needs to keep itself healthy and to also access more rational thinking and to have the hormone and neurotransmitter levels that it needs to help you cope with stress in a better way. So there's lots of other various tools that we can use, particularly also for dealing with the more cognitive, the thought processes, activities of reflection and journaling and communication.